Wow, you guys have no idea how lucky we are right now. It literally just got done pouring rain, and coincidentally, I made it to my destination here. And today we are in Morningside Park. I've never been here before. Out of all these years I've lived in Miami, it is a huge park here by the bay. It's so big we won't even be able to walk all of it in the video, it seems like. And there's a neighborhood right on the other side of this park, which I'll walk for you guys in the next video, so we can see some new things and some new houses in these next couple of videos. But today I came across this really fascinating story about how renters are choosing to rent because of one reason or another, and many of them gave a bunch of their reasonings and explanations, and I wanted to start off the video with this because I think this sort of information can help a lot of people who, number one, either feel pressured into buying a home by a lot of people because they say it's the right thing to do, it's a smart move financially, or it could help people that are kind of forced to rent right now that are not able to buy a home, who wish that they could buy because the housing market is just in an unfavorable situation still for a lot of people when it comes to pricing and interest rates and inventory. So this one person says that they have no desire to fix anything that goes wrong. They love it when it's someone else's problem, and they also love getting to change their entire neighborhood and apartment every few years at will. And I've heard a lot of people say that before here in Miami as well. I used to have friends that used to say the same thing, that, you know, liked renting a new place every couple of years, even if they didn't have to move. Like the rent wasn't going up, and, you know, the old days when you weren't being forced out of a place, they would move anyhow just to experience something new. And I thought it was kind of crazy because I'm more of like the stability type. I like, you know, a permanent place to live, but some people like that. And I can definitely see how not having the maintenance issues be your problem is a desirable aspect of it as well. But I will say that as a tenant, you're not responsible for fixing up the apartment in case there's major problems or whatever. But if you get a bad landlord and they're not responsive, you could have, you know, some serious things go wrong with the place that, you know, you might need, like a washing machine that breaks and they don't replace it for a month or two, or, you know, the ice maker in the fridge isn't working, or little things like that that you want them to fix, but maybe they're kind of dragging their feet on, even though it's their responsibility. So there's always that to compete against as well. Now this one does make a lot of sense. This person says, my priority is to travel. It doesn't make sense for me to invest in one place when I'm not planning on ever staying in one place for a very long time. I also don't know where I want to settle because I know I don't plan on living long-term in the US. If I stop in Scotland and fall in love, or in Australia and I don't want to leave, I may change my mind. As it is, I haven't found anywhere I have an interest in living in for longer than a few years. So sure, if you're the nomadic type of person that just likes changing up the country and city that you live in every couple of years, then buying a place definitely isn't for you unless it's for investment, because it just won't make any sense and does not give you that flexibility you need for sure. How about this one? I owned a home briefly in my 20s. After a broken furnace and window in the first 6 months of ownership, I sold it and have rented ever since. Being a single person who makes a median range income doesn't qualify me for home ownership. And even if it did, I'm not a fan of the upkeep and repairs and taxes, not to mention the crazy interest rates and wildly fluctuating home values. Now, I don't know about this one. I feel like this person is being too unrealistic about the cost of ownership versus renting, especially depending on where you live. Like, I've shown you guys many examples in my videos of how here in Miami, it can be a lot more expensive in many cases to rent than it is to buy something, even at today's prices, because even in my own example, I showed you guys what it costs, and a lot of people face the same thing, you know? Why would you pay $4,000 a month in rent when you can own something for that price is kind of the logic here. Sure, not a fan of the upkeep and repairs and all this. You have the landlord that can do all of that, But it's not like if you're a homeowner, you have to do it all yourself. You can hire someone to do it. You know what I'm saying? I think that's kind of a weak argument about renting versus buying, as that being kind of like the only reason to do this. Actually, it's really nice being out here after the rain like this because it's not very hot, and got a lot of clouds keeping it cooler out here, and there's no one out here because people don't come to parks when it's raining like me. Now, I saw a lot of other people here saying how, you know, they really want to rent something instead of own something because they don't want to be responsible for all the repairs. In fact, there was one tenant here that said a bunch of things went wrong with their apartment in a relatively short period of time. Things like a window got broke by a rock from the landscaper, the toilet wouldn't stop running, the fridge decided to break around the same time as well, and they also had a plumbing issue. And this person was like having a big wake-up call saying, listen, if I had to pay for all of this, you know, it'd be almost unaffordable, versus since they're renting, they feel more confident that that was the better move. Now, I will say this, that if you are a renter and your number one priority is having the landlord take care of everything, and your main concern is cost, because these things do cost a lot of money to repair, and you know you can't afford it, then I would say that is a legitimate argument to be renting instead of buying something. Because if you don't really have any sort of nest egg saved up, especially after the purchase, and you have to put things on credit for repairs, then yes, you're putting yourself in a pretty dangerous position, and you're probably just not ready to own something yet. Now, this one could be a legitimate reason to rent. This couple says that they live in one of the top places in the country, doesn't say where. They say they rent a cute house that's in the prime spot of town, and they have bars, restaurants, shopping, and walking trails all around. And they said that they would buy there in a heartbeat, but nothing ever comes up for sale, and when it does, it's well over $1 million and they can't afford it. So in this case, the renters are renting in an area that they probably actually can't afford to buy in, but somehow it's cheaper to actually rent there, which is the case in other places as well. There are places where it is definitely cheaper to rent than it is to own something. And if location is your number one priority about where you're living, and it's not available to buy something in the area, then that could be a legitimate reason to rent. Obviously not forever, but I think, you know, as a lifestyle decision for a little while, then I think it would be okay. Let's face it, guys, there's more to life than just money. You only live once, and if you want to experience new places like this, like people that like to travel, or people that want to live in these prime locations but can't afford to buy there, then why not live it up for a little while? I think as long as you don't overdo it, and you don't you know, stay too long in one place, that could end up, you know, robbing you of any sort of future of being able to buy your own home, if that's the goal. Sure, as long as you're responsible about it, essentially. Now, this person who's a renter has a pretty cynical point of view on buying a home, but at the same time, it does make a lot of sense. Listen to this. I'll rent versus buy because of the overall cost. First, you have the interest, which is tens of thousands of dollars, which is all you pay for the first several years of the mortgage, which means you'll be upside down for a long time. That statement is totally true. Some people seem to forget that you need at least a 2% maintenance fund set aside because something will go wrong. I also 100% agree with that too. Then, you need to have all the proper insurance to keep yourself covered and hope the insurance company doesn't find a loophole when the time comes to fix things. Also true, look at all the insurance problems we've been covering here in Florida. It is insane, guys, how much people are getting slammed with these insurance hikes. Then you always have property tax to pay, which always goes up too, by the way, for the most part. And of course, the mortgage, which is a 30-year commitment, that's half of your life. Of course, you can resell the property, but by the time you subtract all the money you spent maintaining the property, then your profits are smaller than you think. And this guy goes on to say that right now, I save thousands of dollars a year by renting alone, even after calculating the tax savings of buying a home, let alone the money I don't have to put aside for everything else. You can make a solid 2% plus every year by putting money into an index fund 3 to 4% a year by putting money into a high yield savings account, and 3 to 6% if the company matches into a 401k. One side definitely looks better than the other to me. Now, this used to be me, guys. Like, this guy was me. This is how I used to handle renting before I became a homeowner. You know, I had a great deal when I was renting that definitely I didn't want to give up. But all good things come to an end, and eventually you're done. The lease is over and the landlord doesn't want you there no more. You have no choice but to move, okay? That's what happened. But the good thing is all those years paying a decent price on rent allowed me and my wife to, you know, save and invest the difference that we would have been spending on buying a home, okay? And since we did smart things with the money instead of just blew it all on going out and drugs and alcohol, like a lot of people do, it enabled us to get ahead. So I think some people can handle this very intelligently if they know what they're doing. You know, if you can get a well below market value rental deal or rent in a cheap area because you work remotely and save a lot of money like that, then renting can be a fabulous option if you know how to invest the difference that you would be spending if you owned a place. And that can really pay dividends into the future. I recommend people do this, but only if you have the financial discipline to save and invest that difference, because if you don't, it really makes no sense, you know? I'm definitely going to be coming back here again in the future. This is my kind of place. Lots of nature, very quiet, even though it's smack dead in the middle of Miami like this. It's a nice little secret find here, and I'm happy to be here shooting this for you guys. Now, this other person says that they're in their early 40s and still renting, and the simple reason is because they moved around a lot because of jobs. They never really felt settled anywhere to buy a house. The thought of being anchored down kind of terrifies them, so scared of commitment, I suppose. And they're also afraid of how many repairs the house might need. You know, what if the neighbors are crap? What if I hate my job? And just kind of being locked into that situation, which I think also is a reasonable concern. This person's concerns reminds me of people that, you know, are concerned about having kids, right? People always wonder when's the right time to have kids, and the answer is always the same, that there is no right time, you know? It's never gonna be the right time. And I think something can be said about home ownership as well, because it is a very big commitment, and it can feel scary for a lot of people getting into it for the first time. As long as you're ready financially, I think that's the most important thing. Some people might never be ready, emotionally speaking, because of the commitment aspect of it. But if you know you can pay for the house, you know you're gonna have money left over for repairs, even if you're not handy, you can pay someone else to do things. But it's also a preference, guys. Some people just don't want to have that pressure of being a homeowner, and that's personal choice. And I'm sure a lot of would-be home buyers out there will thank you right now for not joining in on the madness, because it just means more left over for them. So if you want to be a renter for life, knock yourself out. This person says, I bought a house in 2003 and the crisis of 2008 destroyed any chances of me having equity in my home. Combining typical maintenance costs with an upside down mortgage was untenable. I let the house go into foreclosure and I've rented ever since. Even when my income passed over $200,000 annually, I continued to rent. I just started renting houses instead of apartments. I'm not responsible for the house, the gas lines, the sewer, the appliances. If anything breaks, someone else is responsible for it. As you can see, that's kind of a recurring theme for a lot of choice renters, is that they just don't want to be responsible for repairs and the cost of repairs. I rent to avoid the heartbreak of a down market and the absurd costs of maintaining it. When I'm ready to leave, to move on, to chase an opportunity, I'm not weighed down by the obligation of a 30-year mortgage. I don't have to find a buyer. I don't care about protecting curb appeal. I just leave. It's glorious. I'm liquid and free. Homeowners are not. Once again, recurring theme here: freedom, not wanting to pay for repairs, and lack of commitment. It seems to be almost a personality type for people that could be renters for life versus people who prefer to be homeowners. But this person, as you can see, had a little bit more of a unique situation compared to a lot of the other ones we talked about, and they said that they got burned in the 2008 financial crisis and lost their house to foreclosure. And this is the same type of thing that I've been warning people about right now who are looking at buying today, because people that are doing this could be facing a similar fate, unfortunately, whether they realize it or not, because there are many factors that are going to be contributing to where the housing market goes, and many of them are not looking too good right now. I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee a 20 or 30% drop in prices or a huge crash. I can't guarantee prices go up. I can't guarantee anything. But what I can guarantee you is that if you're a buyer today, you're in a much more vulnerable position of things like this potentially happening to you versus someone who bought 4 or 5 years ago, for example. And that's just a warning, guys. It doesn't mean don't do it. It means that if you're gonna do it, recognize the risk and know what you're getting yourself into ahead of time, because otherwise you end up like this person that loses the home to foreclosure. And that's one of the most damaging things that can happen to you financially and your entire life. You know, it ruins your credit. It makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to buy another home if that's the goal eventually, at least for a while. Let's face it, guys, if you don't have good credit, it ruins many other opportunities for you as well. Now, another person mentioned that they want to remain renters because they are a military family and they have to move around a lot, which I think also could be a legitimate reason to rent for a while, because they mentioned here that they recently had to sell a house and they were able to, but not without, you know, all the hassles that come along with that. And when you're trying to find a new place to live as a military family, obviously buying something is a lot more involved and it's a longer process than just renting something for a year or two and then you're moving on already to the next place. So, you know, there are legitimate reasons to be a renter, but I think most of them, at least from what I can tell, what people are saying here, is that a lot of these situations that justify renting are mostly temporary, unless we're talking about just flat out personal choice, like some of these people that just will never want to own a home. How about this one? When I got divorced, I learned nothing is guaranteed. I decided I would rather spend my money on vacations, traveling, and creating fantastic memories with my daughter instead of being tied down to a house. The work that comes with it, the money, the memories you take with you, not the house. When I am gone, she will still have the memories, and she can always buy her own house if she wants one, wherever she wants to live. You have some people here that obviously have been burned by relationships, by a bad housing market crash, and those are reasons that they don't want to own a home, and rightfully so. I'm not here to tell everybody that your number one goal should be to be a homeowner in life, otherwise you're a loser and you'll never have anything. I completely disagree with that. I think it all just comes down to how smart you are with the money, guys, because you can still have a nice life and be a renter for life if you know how to save and invest your money. And in some ways, being a homeowner does make that a little bit easier, because sometimes you get this accidental appreciation like we saw with this huge housing market run-up, and you know, only homeowners got to take advantage of that while renters did not. Look how flooded this part of the park is over here. But I think it's perfectly fine for people to make their decisions in life. Like, hey, some people want to have a huge family. Some people don't want to have any kids at all. You know, some people want to live by the beach. Some people want to live in the middle of nowhere. It's all personal preference, and no one should be telling you or forcing you that there's one way to do everything. Is being a homeowner, does that have its advantages? Sure. Does it have its disadvantages? Obviously it does, like a lot of people are talking about here. Now, this person says that they make $140K a year as an engineer, and they can afford a home because they're in Bellingham, Washington. But they're saying that they're going to rent for a while for a few reasons. Where they grew up in rural Pennsylvania, you'll pay $500,000 for a 900 square foot place, and you won't even like it. And that'll cost you over $3,000 a month for a mortgage. And right now, they rent a larger place and nicer with friends as roommates and pay $700 to $900 a month each, and they like this setup much better because they're a social person and they like living with other people and having a lower rent obligation. But I will say, you know, as somebody who's always thinking business, that this person could be missing out on being a homeowner, especially with the lifestyle they described. Because if someone like this were to buy a house and then house hack the house and have roommates living in every other room, they could essentially be having their roommates pay for their home rather than be a renter doing essentially the same thing. Other than personal preference, I'm not sure why anyone would actually do this, because their reasoning doesn't really hold up too well if you ask me with this. Like, I just want to be social and have roommates and pay less than it costs to own a place. Like, you could be doing that while you own the place. So some people don't think this through, and that's why I wanted to make this video, guys, because it's interesting to hear other people's reasoning against being a homeowner to see how well that they hold up in reality. Now, this last person on the list, their reasoning is just flat out laziness, okay? They don't want to do any work around the house, but it's more importantly not just not wanting to do it. They would just rather, you know, have all the free time that it would normally take as a homeowner to cut the grass and paint and do landscaping and do all these things. As a condo owner, I can relate to that as well. In fact, I think that is one of the biggest benefits of living in a condo versus a house, if you ask me, someone who's lived in both. I grew up in a house my whole life, and like this person explains, you know, I grew up seeing my parents fixing everything around the house, and every time they had free time, it was always something broke that needed to be fixed, you know, like painting, mowing the lawn, shoveling the snow, other chores that come up, and surprise maintenance tasks that if you want to have a life but you own a house, then sometimes those two things don't really go hand in hand, unfortunately. And as someone who lives in a condo, I don't have to do any maintenance. Sure, I have to maintain my own condo, you know, inside my walls, but you know, if a light bulb goes out in the hallway or the AC goes out in the hallway, I don't have to fix that. You know, the landscapers come once a week, they take care of the grounds, the pool guy shows up, and the building manager handles and coordinates all that. I don't have to be on top of any of that stuff. So yeah, is the maintenance fee expensive? Hell yeah, it is. Like I've shared with you guys, it's very expensive, but at least you do get something in return for it. It's not like you pay all this money and it's just throwing it down the drain. Because if you lived in a house and you wanted to have people coming and going and doing all these things for you, that would cost a pretty penny as well. So I think there is some value in that, only because time is really the most valuable thing that any of us have. And if your time is more important to you than doing chores around the house and maintaining the place, which I can relate to, then I think that's another situation where this person is a little bit misguided, thinking that, well, I might as well be a renter instead of a homeowner because then I don't have to do any of this stuff. But you could be a homeowner and own a condo or a townhouse instead and still not have any of those obligations that you're referring to, and still have all of your time while building equity and having your own place to live. So I think a lot of these people had some legitimate reasons to be temporary renters. I think most of them are just a little too afraid of getting their hands dirty or what the real cost might be, unless you're buying a house here in Florida, because the cost to own anything here now is just absolutely insane. By the time you do factor in the rising insurance costs and the rising maintenance costs on everything here, it's just totally upside down. But if you live in a normal area of the country where you can still get a $1,200 or $1,300 a month mortgage, and that's lower than a lot of people pay in rent in many areas. So I just wanted to kind of make that point, that I do think some of these people who are renting could potentially be homeowners and have the same setup that they have right now when it comes to having more of that free time and having other people pay the bills for them via house hacking and things like this. And that was really like the purpose of this video, is just to kind of open up people's eyes and their minds to things that maybe they wouldn't have thought of on their own. Because this is all I've done for the last 14 years, guys, is, you know, real estate deals and thinking about real estate deals and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And ultimately, bringing this over to YouTube is just to help you guys think about and figure some of these things out. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I post a new video. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.